Well guys, I've done it again.
Another successful procedure.
No, not quite. As a matter of fact, I kind of borked some stuff in the process here.
This guy sucks.
So let me show you what I did here. What I was doing is, this is a board from an LG plasma TV. And I guess these have a tendency for this chip here to go bad to the point where like a bunch of the inputs and the HDMIs like are not recognized when there's like a video signal on them. I thought initially, because I was just told that there was like no inputs at the HDMI connections here, so I thought maybe this chip was bad, which is an HDMI switch. So you've got your 4 HDMI inputs here. They all go to this switch. This switch goes directly to this big chip here. That's like the scaler and the controller for like all the inputs and everything. But as it turns out, like some of these other ones aren't working either. So that pretty much points to this chip here being bad. So I went to replace it, and this is actually the original one right here, you can see. So no good. And this here is the replacement. So I had already reflowed the new one onto the pads there, but unfortunately something went wrong and I ended up getting some balls touching each other like underneath the chip, so they kind of like they bridged and it just kind of went south from there. So I had to remove it and reball the chip, the new one. And when I was in the process of cleaning the pads, I ended up pulling 3 of them. Thankfully I was able to save them, and they are right here. I'll get you closer so you can actually see them, but I have them on this little cap right here. Luckily 2 of them were unused, so they're just kind of there, you know, like as pads, but they're not actually connected to anything. But one of them was, and there is a trace going off from that one there. So let me zoom in here so you guys can get a good look at what I did. Alright, so the first 2 that I pulled are these 2 right here. And these, as I mentioned, they don't have any vias or anything going to them, so I'm pretty sure that these were unconnected. Like you can see, like there's a few here that aren't connected to anything. And there is this via here going off to these 2 pads, but there was nothing here bridging that pad to that via there. So yeah, that one's unused, and this one here was also unused. So I got lucky there. Everything else looks fine. But then over in this side here, right here next to this E, there was another pad right there, and that one is connected to that trace that you can see right there that I've kind of scraped off some of the mask off there. So I'm going to have to replace this pad here for sure, and these 2 I will probably just reattach, just so that the balls have something to solder to and they don't try to, like, you know, squeeze out and touch one of the other pads like over here somewhere. I don't have anything specific to bond the pads to these 2 spots right here, but the only thing that I could find that I had around that might be able to handle this is some JB Weld. So we're going to try to bond these with JB Weld. I'm going to give these like a really good cleaning first. And here's the original pads. Let me show you those real quick, because I said I did save them. I managed to salvage them. Here's all 3 of them. So there's one right there. I think this was actually the one that was connected. You can see that there's a little bit of a kind of like a little tab right there off to the left. And then these 2 that are just plain and round, I'm pretty sure are the ones that were on those other 2 positions. So these 2 are the ones that I'm going to reapply, but this one here I'm going to have to replace, because there's no way I'm going to be able to get a pretty decent connection between this point here and the trace, just because basically it's severed right there, so there's not enough material to like cause like an overlapping bridge between the 2, or like, yeah, overlapping like those traces. So what I'm going to do for that is, I've got this 360 board here that's been somewhat damaged, so I'm not really too worried about saving anything, but some of these traces here are lifted already, or some of these pads are kind of lifted already, so I'm just going to give them I'm going to find one, give it a good cleaning, and I'm just going to pull one of these up. See, there's a, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff around here. Anyway, so I'm going to find one that looks like it's in pretty good shape and has enough of a trace there, and I'm going to use that to replace the one on the other board, and then that way I'll have some trace there that I can overlap with the one that's on the board there for the board on the TV. So the first thing I want to do is I want to persuade one of these pads here, like close to the edge, to lift so that I can use that, salvage it, and use it on my other board. And the way I'm going to do that, or at least attempt to do that, okay, disclaimer, I've never actually had to fix a trace like this before, or nothing that tiny, so I'm sort of kind of doing this by just based off some stuff, you know, that I found online. I found that you can buy like pre-made BGA pads like that with like a small piece of trace, you know, like leading off of it, but I'm not going to go order a kind of an expensive kit just to do this, you know. If I can try to do it with like stuff I can salvage from here. So anyways, yeah, so I'm going to try to salvage one of these pads here by trying to overheat this area and hopefully get one of these to lift. And there's, like, you know, adhesives you can use to do this sort of repair, but those are also kind of pricey and for kind of a one-time thing, because I really don't do anything like this that often, so I have a feeling like whatever stuff I got would go bad before I even had a chance to use it again. And JB Weld was like one of the only epoxies I could find that could withstand the heat of soldering. According to the package, it's rated at 550 Fahrenheit when fully cured, which comes out to about 287, almost 288 Celsius, which should be way more than we need to get that chip to reflow onto the board, because those balls underneath it are actually leaded solder. So it should be just fine for that. It's not like I'm going to be heating it directly with a soldering iron. It's all just going to be with the hot air. So I think it should be more than okay. But I guess we'll find out. And then the other thing I have to do is the point where I'm going to basically solder the two overlapping traces together, is I'm going to have to protect them. And I'll do what I've done before that I've actually shown, where I used some glass paint that seems to do the trick just fine. I've used that to protect some traces that had like partially lifted before, and that seems to work well also. And right now I'm kind of just hoping to see if like one of these here is moving off to the side, but not really getting much action right now, so I'm going to just keep heating them up, and hopefully that causes the adhesive to detach, which is what I'm kind of hoping for. Maybe I can also kind of poke at it while I do this and get one of these to lift up. This one that I'm poking at right here looks like it'd be a pretty good candidate for the job. And I think it actually is moving, so I think this one will work. I just gotta be careful not to break it at the point where the pad actually connects to that. So I'm going to try to be real careful, and I might actually have to do this off the camera because I'm trying to do this from the side and I can't really see much. Alright, so it was a pain in the butt, but I finally managed to get one. And there it is. You can see, super tiny on this seemingly huge looking piece of paper towel. Okay, there's all four of my pads now, but of course we're only going to use the two round ones right here, and then the one with the trace right here. And I was trying to flip this over, but kind of can't, and I can't even really grab it with these tweezers. You can see how big these tweezers look compared to these pads. And also the reason why I was kind of going with this 360 pad here is because these were meant for what is it, 0.06 millimeter balls, and this one is the same size, or 0.6 millimeter. So these are meant for the same size, so that's why I believe that should be a good candidate as a replacement for that one. No, while I was trying to straighten the trace on that one, I accidentally broke it off, and this is while I was trying to clean it. You can see it's sitting here on a paper towel. You can see a bunch of little tiny fibers, and I broke it. So, time to go hunt for another one. See that one right there? I think that one would definitely be a good one because it's got the little piece of straight trace coming out from underneath it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sharp blade and score it right across, like right here somewhere. And then after that, I'm going to heat it with the soldering iron and try to get it to lift up, and then try to scavenge it that way. Alright, so that second one was a bust, but I think the third time's actually going to be the charm here. I was able to get one here with a pretty good piece of trace there, and it's a little slightly bent, but that's only because when I had to pull it up, it kind of bent a little bit, but it's not like I give it a lot of abuse, so I think it's going to work. Now, just to give it a really good cleaning. Believe it or not, so far, everything that we've gotten done here is what I would consider the easy part. I have cleaned them with acetone, well, alcohol and then acetone, and right now they're sitting on top of a piece of metal here, and you can see a lot of the grain on the metal there. But the hard part is going to be getting these transferred to the board on top of the little tiny blob of JB weld that I'm going to put in each one of those little wells. So let's go do that now because I've already cleaned the board. Actually, with using my phone and the scanner lens again, you can see right there those two little wells. They should have enough. And then the third one up here, where is it? It is right there. Should have enough as well. It actually looks like it might be a little too much. But if any of it kind of overruns, I should be able to clean it up after the fact. So I don't think it should be a big deal. I can even try to scrape some off if needed, but I can't add anymore. So we'll do with that, and let's see what happens. You know what's more annoying than lifting the pads off the board? Is hitting record or somehow losing your footage that you just recorded and worked hard on. So I don't know what happened. I tried to record the process of moving the new pads over to their locations on the board there, and it's gone, or I just never recorded it at all. But I thought I did, so I don't know what happens. But anyways, I took some pictures of the actual aftermath of what happened there. So after I put the new pad, or well, not the pads back onto their little spots, and I was trying to get that one pad that had the little bit of trace on it, I positioned it, and when I went to go tack it down to solder to the existing trace, the little piece broke off of it. So after I got it cleaned up and everything, basically I had a pad that was glued down, but I had the other piece of trace that, you know, just kind of came to the edge, but then didn't actually make any physical contact with it. So there was like no electrical contact at all between those two. So what I did is I got a really very fine strand of wire, and I flattened it. I flattened the end as much as I could, and then I trimmed it just so it wasn't too long, and I placed it on top of the existing trace and the edge of the new circular pad there. And after that, basically everything else is what follows. That little piece of wire didn't exactly sit centered, so I tried to flow it on with just a little bit of hot air, but it didn't quite work, as you'll see. Alright, well, the hot air didn't really help me in this situation, but I was able to touch it with the very fine tip of the soldering iron, and I was able to get it to center itself a little bit better there. Okay, so that part's done, and it turned out a little blobbier than I was kind of hoping for, but I mean, I guess we're going to have to make do. I tried to clean them up a little bit so everything's kind of neat and tidy, and that little bit of paint there should help like hold that little wire from moving around once we start the reflow process. Alright, so let's see if we're getting continuity between that pad and where it's supposed to go. The pad that's like immediately below that one, like in the pictures, it seems like those two are a pair there. So those two go off to up here. Actually, all those lines like in this area all go to like this area right here with a bunch of these capacitors, and that goes to that chip. So the first capacitor goes to like one pair. The second capacitor here goes, actually not capacitors, those are resistors, but the second one here is the one that goes to those two pairs. So if I touch Well, first of all, let me show you that this is set in continuity, so we're just going to get beeping when we touch it. Alright, so if we touch the one below that one, the one that we just fixed, and touch it to this resistor here, we get a beep. So now let's touch it to the one we fixed, and touch it to the other side of that resistor, and hopefully we should get some continuity there. And sure enough, we are. So I think that's going to work. Cool. You know how sometimes you're laying in bed and you're all comfortable about to go to sleep, and all of a sudden you just start thinking about all the bad things in the world? Yeah, okay, well, I do. So anyways, what I was thinking about is I didn't think about it right at the time, but the two pads that are over here, I'm hoping that the epoxy bonded with the bottom of those enough to hold them in place, because when I was trying to get those cleaned up and everything, I realized that there was a slight bit of solder underneath them where it normally would have been bonded to the board. So the problem with that is that once the solder flows, once I go to do the reflow, there's a possibility that that solder melting could cause it to detach from the epoxy. So I'm really hoping that there was just enough bare copper there where the epoxy is going to bond to that, and heating it up, it's not going to cause like solder to flow and then cause it to detach. Which, like I said, on these two, I guess it wouldn't be a big deal, like as long as the two balls don't start wandering around and touching other balls. And there's a bunch of unused pins there, but I don't know on the chip itself if they're actually used for anything, and if those touching would cause any issues. So a lot of uncertainty there, and I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue. This one up here I don't think is going to be an issue at all, because I already touched it with the soldering iron several times, and it's pretty hot, and it didn't detach at all, even though I kind of like rubbed on it a little bit just to try to get it cleaned up there when I was trying to attach the original trace that was on that pad to the trace on the board there, and nothing happened. So I have a pretty good confidence of that one. I don't know about those two, but we'll find out. Actually, no, we won't, because we can't even see it. But as long as there's no issues, and this will, and the TV turns on and everything, then I think we'll be okay. I am not going to go through the whole reflow process, because that's really tedious and time consuming, and basically we're just reapplying the chip to the board. I've already done video before on doing a reflow. So we're just going to go from here to hopefully being able to test this and see if it's going to work or not. So fingers crossed. But one little thing that I wasn't too happy about, but I don't think it will be too big of a deal, is that the board seems like it's slightly warped, and I tried to let it bake for a while, to try to get it to de-stress a little and maybe really flatten out. I even offered it like a full board massage, but it being a circuit board, it wouldn't reply to me or respond, and so anywho, it's really not that bad, and I think maybe part of it has to do with maybe the balls on the chip, not being completely circular, like perfectly circular or anything. So it kind of just taps a little bit back and forth, but I think that should be okay. Like once it flows, I think it should, adhere pretty well. But hopefully that doesn't end up being another issue. But I cannot get this board to get any flatter than it already is. I think also part of the reason why it's slightly warped was because you see these holes right here, there was a heatsink that sits there, and the board as it was already like slightly bent from the pressure of the springs that hold those clips in. So yeah, I think we're just gonna have to make do, and it's not like I have a special jig or anything for this. I was hoping I'd be able to get a better shot of this, but this is as good as I can get it at the moment. But I checked all four sides, and there's no bridged balls underneath anywhere, so I think so far everything's looking pretty good. It appears that the package seated pretty well, so I think it should be fine. The board's been placed back in the TV here, but just partially. I only have like one screw holding it down, and then I replaced the heatsink here. And you can see what I mean here. It's got these like spring-loaded clips here, so those kind of pull on the board a bit, and because the center here is on the chip itself, it causes a little bit of bend, and I think that's why I had such a hard time trying to get this thing straightened out, after it'd been like that for years. So okay, everything else is hooked up, and you can tell that this is a plasma because of the way it is. How neat is that?
That's pretty neat.
It's plugged in now, and I'm going to see if it powers up. This wasn't even meant to be a repair video for this TV. It was just to see if we could, figure out a way to get the BGA pad back on there. But I'm going to try to turn it on and see if anything displays. Hopefully nothing's gone haywire here or gotten any worse than it was. And we're going to see if we can see anything here on the display. And I just kind of have this up against the couch because I don't have the stand for it. And it's a real hassle because it's so heavy. I'm trying to feel the power button here. Okay, there we go. I just touched it. And we saw the screen flicker there. Although I'm not seeing anything on the display. Alright, well that was a bust. Turns out that apparently there's a short on there's two little power supplies right here. One of them is 1.8 volts and the other one's 2.5, and I don't remember which one's which, but basically they're both shorted, and those two are supposed to supply power to the chip here. And so I don't know if some of the balls like shorted underneath, or if this chip is bad, and went bad somehow. I don't know exactly how that would have happened, but it's a possibility. So I'm gonna have to pull it out and troubleshoot a little bit more. And I mean, obviously I didn't want to have to pull it back off, but on the bright side, I guess we can see how those pads held up after bonding them back down to the board. Okay, I removed the chip, and we can't win them all in the first try all the time, but check it out. These actually held up surprisingly well. They're still on the board even after I cleaned them. Well, I didn't completely clean the board. What I did is I just put like a ball of solder on there, and then I just kind of dragged it around to try to remove as much of the solder as I could. And these two are still in place, and so is the one up here. Some of the paint actually came off when I was like scraping the ball around, so yeah, I guess this stuff like isn't meant to be as high temp as like the epoxy that I used here. But the little trace, or yeah, that little wire that I placed right there, that's still intact, so that wasn't an issue. So yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on here, and see if I can get this thing working again. But that wasn't the point of this video. The point of this video was just to see if JB Weld would be a good candidate for bonding down pads like this, especially like really tiny stuff. And it seems that it worked fairly well, so I'm actually kind of happy with that. I think if I ever need to do it again, that's probably what I'm going to resort to using. So yeah, as I mentioned, this wasn't a repair video for this board. This was just to experiment with some JB Weld. And yeah, it really sucks that I had to pull this chip back off, but at least it gave us a good idea of how this did. So thanks again for watching, guys. Remember, if you like this kind of stuff, to subscribe if you're not. And thank you once again. I'll see you guys around the bench.
I guess this guy's alright.